is aware of that. So first of all, I just once again welcome to this webinar on the mental health of early and mid-career researchers, although I guess this is a topic that spans researchers at all career stages. As a little bit of background, the Young Academy of Europe has been having thematic webinar series for the last 2 or 3 years. And last year it was on art and science collaboration, how those work together. And that was at the AGM last year in Munich that we decided on mental health as a really important topic. And the amount of people that were registered and that are attending this webinar is evidence, I guess, that this is a topic that is really important to a lot of young researchers today. So I'm excited that we have this series. This is the first webinar, and there will be 2 more, one in May and one in June, and then we will culminate in an event at the AGM in August in Strasbourg. Just before we get started, I just wanted to remind everyone of normal Zoom etiquette, if you like. So try and please keep yourself muted if you're not talking, but feel free to keep your videos going, of course. There will be opportunities for questions after each of the talks, about 5 minutes for that. Please just raise a virtual hand or write something directly into the chat. Victoria's monitoring our chat. And I would say at the end, we're hoping to keep around 15 to 20 minutes where anyone can come in with your own experiences, with your own reflections. Today is a little bit about focusing on our own individual strategies or ways that we can address the mental health and the pressures, navigate the pressures of academia. So it would be fantastic to hear from some others as well about their particular contexts and how they've overcome certain pressures or addressing them at least. I think without further ado, I will call on our first speaker then, who today is Bernadette Kuhn. Bernadette, I will not say too much more about you. I'll let you say a few words about yourself if you like. Otherwise, feel free to share the screen and the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. Yes, my name is Bernadette Kuhn and I'm from Hungary. I'm an associate professor and researcher at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, Hungary. And I'm a member of the Hungarian Young Academy as well since 2023, so almost for a year. And my research field is addictions. So I have been researching this field since or for 15 years or something like that. So I did my PhD in this topic, but that time I focused on substance use disorders. But after that, I was opened to behavior addictions, which is a very big topic. And among this topic, one is work addiction. And my specific focus is regarding my research is work addiction. And today I will give a presentation on this topic. So if you don't mind, I'm sharing my screen and I hope it will work. So I gave a title as risk factors of work addiction. But first of all, I would like to a little bit define this topic. And the first definition of work addiction, or so-called workaholism, was in 1971. So this is not a very young problem or young issue. However, the researcher has just started to get more and more research just regarding the millennium. And as I mentioned, I'm a researcher who focuses on addictions. So I follow the model of addictions in work addiction as well, which is very commonly used regarding this problem. And here you can see the so-called components model of addictions, which shows the seven most important symptoms or components of addictive disorders, which we can use for several different addictions, like substance
Sorry,
use disorder.
Bernadette, your
Yes.
slides are not moving. Have you moved your slides? They're not moving.
Oh, okay. What can I do? I don't know.
For
Now,
example, that's move it. You could just move it manually like that. That's fine.
now is it okay?
Yes, now we have the 7 orange boxes, if that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, and now you can see the further one, just to try it.
No.
Okay, and if I do like this,
Yes, that's working.
okay, then I won't share my screen. I mean, won't use the presenter option, if you
No,
don't
the
mind.
presenter
So,
mode doesn't seem to be working today, but this is working really fine as it is. So please continue.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for this notification. So yes, here are the 7 components, and it can also be true for work addiction. The salience component means that work is the most important thing is in the person's life, and every other thing is just behind of work. Mood modification is about that person uses work just to manage his or her emotional states, or maybe to escape to work from problems, from emotional problems and conflicts. Tolerance is about the problem when we can see that the person just increase the amount of work, increase the task, increase the time of work, because the lower amount is not enough anymore. Withdrawal symptoms is not about physical symptoms, but mental symptoms, like if the person cannot work, here he is not allowed to work, then they feel negative emotions like stress or irritability or anxiety. And conflicts and problems are about the negative consequences of too much work. So the person experiences negative conflicts with other people, like family members and friends, why the person works so much, and during the weekend, and the problems also about interpersonal problems, but not just that, like mental problems, health issues because of too much work. Now we know that there are several similarities between work addiction and other addictions, but we know that this kind of problem is a little bit different from other addictions. Why? Because work is very useful. It is important in our life, and it is a respectful thing, not just like drug use or gambling in a casino. So people who are affected in work addiction, sometimes they are mentioned that they have a positive addiction, and they have a lot of reinforcements from others, like better salary, better positions, uh, higher power, and a lot of appreciation. So this is a big difference that in case of like substance use disorder or gambling disorder, the reinforcements are about physical things, like if you drink an alcohol, then you feel much better immediately. I mean, in a few minutes or hours, especially if you use other type of stimulants or drugs. But here we can experience long-term rewards. We have to work a lot and wait a lot for positive reinforcement. So this is not just about hedonism. I mean, it's very different from that. And another issue is that if there is a problem, so somebody has work addiction, then it is not really easy to not just define, but say that, okay, I have a problem and I have to ask for help. It is a lot of people deny this problem or not know about it, and there is a lot of self-justifications, like I work a lot for you or for my family just to have more money to have a very nice holiday and a bigger house, etc. And of course they say that I don't have time for going to therapy or ask for help. So there are big differences, and in the society, this is absolutely a positive thing in several different ways. And you can find a lot of messages from the media or memes and a lot of contents which about workaholism is a positive thing. even famous people say that in a positive context, that they are workaholics. That's why they are so successful and have a lot of money or power or success in their life. So it is very difficult to say that after these famous people that I have to deal with this issue, because we see that everybody who is successful work more and more. But we know that there are several negative consequences of work addiction. So based on studies in the last decades, we know that mental issues, health issues, and interpersonal problems and workplace problems can connect to work addiction. Therefore, it is very important to define or find out the risk factors of this problem to prevent it very early as we can. And regarding the risk factors, we can differentiate between the macro level factors, the meso level factors, and the micro level factors. Macro level factors are about the culture, the economy, or the specific country where we live, because there can be differences in work ethic and a lot of things. In meso level, we have to focus on the specific characteristics of the workplace and the work environment, the social norms and expectations in the workplace, etc. And in the micro level, there are the individual factors like personality, motivations, beliefs, expectations, cognitive factors. So all of them about the person who works in that place. Regarding the macro factor, it would be very good to know how big is the problem. So we have to check the prevalence rates of work addiction. Unfortunately, there are very limited data on this topic because, as I know, only in 4 countries we can find prevalence rates based on representative population studies. Here you can see these 4 countries, and as you can see here, regarding Europe, we can say that the prevalence rates are much more similar between 7 and 10%. So we know data from Germany, Norway, and Hungary. And the 4th country is from South Korea, which is from a very different culture. And we can see here that this prevalence rate is much higher. Almost 40% of the adult working population were categorized in the high risk group of work addiction. I mean, who has work addiction problems. And now we can say that it absolutely a big difference between cultures, like individualistic and collectivist cultures. In Hungary, we conducted a representative survey among adult population, and we defined several risk factors regarding the socio-demographic and work-related factors, like those people who have higher level of education and who have intellectual work has a higher risk for work addiction. So I think it is an important issue for the academic workers. And of course, in higher positions who are leaders or managers also showed higher risk for work addiction. Another thing which is about work-related factors is the flexible work time. So if you can decide when or maybe where you can work, it is a higher risk for work addiction. Just think about the home situation where it is easy to start and finish working, and the borders between work time and free time is difficult to define or control. Regarding the sectors, it was an interesting result in Hungary that we found that the people who work in NGOs has higher risk for work addiction than, for example, those people who work in the profit-oriented sector. Maybe they have higher involvement to help people who have troubles and issues. So maybe this higher organizational identity or the very high need to help to others, maybe this is a a reason, but we don't know exactly. So these are just associations. Regarding age, we did not find any significant differences between age groups, but it wasn't the same regarding gender. I show you here another study of our our research group. It was also a representative study, but not for the whole Hungarian population, but for the young adult people who live in Budapest, which is the capital city of Hungary. And we analyzed the first wave of this longitudinal study, and we found a significant difference between males and females, and we found that the risk for work addiction is a little bit higher, but significantly higher among females. However, I have to mention that if we have a look at meta-analysis in this field, they do not show any significant effect of gender. So I don't know, maybe this is a Hungarian thing, or maybe this is about the young working population. We still have to study or have more research on this issue. Regarding the mesofactors, we have to, so I want to show you what kind of organizational characteristics connect to work addiction. For instance, if the workplace have a very extremely high expectations to the workers, so they have to work always, and they have to be available every time and everywhere, even in evening or during the weekends, or they have to work a lot, and they have other kind of very high expectations. It increases the risk of work addiction. The competitive organizational climate also a risk factor, where everybody has to compete with others to have a better position and to have the grant for that program or project, because just one person can get it. So I think you know what I mean. So this can also increase the risk of work addiction. To strong organizational identity, it is very interesting because a medium level organizational identity is very good for our mental health, and we can feel better in a workplace. But if it's too much, then it means that we live for our company, we live for our workplace, and we don't have a personal life, and it increases the risk of work addiction. If you have a colleague or a superior who suffers in work addiction, then it can be a model for us, or it can increase this competitiveness in the organization. So it is also a risk factor. And the lack of social support in the workplace also a problem, where you cannot talk about your problems, your mental issues, or maybe your fears from burnout or other things. It's a big problem. Then nobody can help you if you are in a situation like this. Regarding the micro level factors, first I would like to show you results on a meta-analysis which was published in 2020. And you can see here that we found that the most important personality factors, it was meta-analysis, were the high perfectionism, the lower level of global self-esteem, which means that the person globally do not think positively his or herself. The performance-based self-esteem showed a positive correlation with work addiction. But the negative affectivity, which means that the person has a tendency to experience negative emotions and emotional instability, showed also a positive correlation with work addiction. Now here we can say that people who suffers in work addiction are not really happy people, because they are not satisfied with themselves. They want to be better and better, and they have a lot of negative or more negative emotions than others. Regarding the other personality factors, on the one hand, we did not find very big correlations. Regarding the big five, it was always like 0.1 or something like that. so very low correlations. And regarding the other factors in the right corner, we can say that these are medium level correlations and positive correlations, but these were based only 1 or 2 studies, so it shows some kind of limitations.
Bernadette, if we could start
Yes.
to wrap up soon so we have time for questions and things like that. Maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm trying to do my best. Okay, so regarding the cognitive functions, we published our results, and we found that those people who have higher symptoms on work addiction, they showed poorer inhibitory control and lower achievement on more complex working memory tasks, which are about updating the informations in the working memory. But they showed higher level in those kind of memory tasks that associates with maintenance of information and storage of information. And they did not show any differences regarding cognitive flexibility. So we can see here that they have some issues in their executive functions like inhibitory control and more complex working memory, but in other cases, in other parts of the executive functions, we do not find any problems. And maybe this would be my last slide, because it is also very important why these people work a lot, and we have to check the work motivations of these people, and we have data about this topic, and there are other studies that checked it. And first of all, we have to say that these people have high motivation to work. It's not another big surprise. But we can say that there is no correlation with a motivation factor, which is more about burnout. So those people have a higher score on a motivation factor who are burned out. But the other important finding is there is no association with intrinsic motivation, which is about I like to work, I enjoy the process of working. It is for fun. It is a fun for me. So these people do not really enjoy working, but they are motivated by introjected motivation, which is about avoiding negative emotional states like shame, guilt, anxiety, and worries. Identified motivation, which is about the motivation when the person, so it is, these people aligned with personal values and instrumental purposes, and they feel the importance of work for their chosen career path. And extrinsic social motivations is also important, which is about I work a lot because I need appreciation from others or the recognition by others. So we absolutely see individual factors in work addiction. I do not have time for the suggestion, but if you would like to have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernadette. So we have, say we take 5 minutes now for if we have any direct questions for Bernadette, and at the end we can circle around and then we'll have some discussion. I do see a question from Emily.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask, of course, about the advice. So if you could maybe share again, because the advices would be very interesting, I think.
Okay. So
this is always the best when you get the question on the slides that you didn't get time to show. Perfect.
Yes, okay. So these are very basic suggestions. I mean, but it can help just to first of all, it would be just focus this, and of course, if it doesn't work, then it is important to ask for help from a psychologist or from a coach. But first of all, it will be check how easy for us to draw boundaries between work and personal life, and try to do this. Like, for instance, I don't want to work after 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the evening or on Sunday. It is important to have more awareness and limits in the use of electronic devices, because we saw that intellectual work is absolutely connected to work addiction, and for intellectual work we use electronic devices, and if we just check the information on a website, then it is very easy to switch to our emails or other place where we can continue working. So just be more aware of this problem. Yes, not using electronic devices immediately after waking up, at bed before sleep. So this is also about the awareness and limitation of using electronic devices. Take time to rest and have social life. It is very important to have break during a working day, and think about it that we will be much so we can work better next day, and we will be happier if we really have time to rest and have social relationships, real relationships. Yes, do not work during meals. So it is important to have real lunch break, for instance, and go out from the building or just have a walk and eat something normal, not just junk food during or in a 5 minutes between two meeting before the screen. Take more time to stress management activities like sport and relaxation. Avoid checking and answering emails in your free time. It is very easy to checking our emails when we are traveling to our workplace, on a bus, etc. So try to avoid this and do other good things like reading a book or something like that. Try to delegate tasks to colleagues. It's a very big issue for workaholics. This is a difficulty for them. Maybe they are afraid that they lose a very important chance, or the superior will think that they are lazy or something like that. But we have to practice this thing because it is very important. The ninth also very important, just trying to say no for a further task. We have a lot of things to do, and yes, sometimes it is very hard to say no because we are afraid that something very important we'll miss, or yes, we miss something important, or the colleague will get that chance, etc. But in the long term, it would be very important. And this is the last one. Talk about your stress and worries with your family, friends, and colleagues, and social support and discussion with the important ones always can help to manage your issues. So these would be our very basic suggestions.
Thanks very much, Bernadette. I don't think we have any more time for any more questions now, but like I say, I'd like to keep a block for about 10 minutes at the end, hopefully. So if people have more questions or comments, they can come in there. But I liked the one about being aware of our electronic use. When I took my work email off my phone, that changed a lot for me. So I could just look out the window on the bus and just watch the day rather than think I could fill 1.5 minutes between stops with an email, which of course you inevitably don't have time to anyway. You get halfway through it and So no, very good. Thanks very much, Bernadette. Then I'd like to ask our second speaker for today, Dara McCashin, to speak. Dara, as for Bernadette, I won't give you an introduction. I'll let you say a few words about yourself, and I give the floor to you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Bernadette, for a great presentation. Actually, there's a lot of conceptual overlap with some of the things that I'll be talking about as well. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of crossover, which is great. So my name is Dara McCashin. I'm Assistant Professor of Psychology in Dublin City University, and I'm a working group chair within a COST Action, which is a European network on researcher mental health and academic mental health. And I was delighted to hear that it was the voice of the Young Academy that asked for this topic to be addressed, which is really, really important because it speaks to a movement of sorts. There's something going on. I think we're all beginning to recognize some of the characteristics of higher education that seems to be adversely impacting our mental health. So I'm going to talk a bit about all of these issues through the prism of the COST Action, and primarily in this sort of structure, a bit about the context first, and some of the evidence that goes with it, some of which Bernadette has nicely addressed with respect to work addiction. And then I'll talk a bit about the actions. I'm always particularly aware of the fact that, I'm it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And very often when we think about what we can do as individuals, we have to balance that out with the fact that institutional, government, and policy factors are perhaps causally related. So I never want to get into that thing of blaming the individual or putting more stress on you to relax and adapt and not check your emails on the bus and so forth. It's often easier said than done. So we'll always balance these points out with the context. And that context always starts something like this. A few observations that I've had, particularly with more early career researchers, is, and particularly cross-culturally, when you start or try to start the conversation about how you're feeling particularly during those early PhD days, it's a tricky conversation to initiate. And there are varying levels of stigma across cultures as well. And let's not forget, we're nested in a context whereby uncertainty defines our careers. And these are just some of the trends that we see from early career research through to where people actually end up or would like to end up. It's highly variable. We also have whether it's spoken or not, the publish or perish dynamic. And I found a lot of the insights from Bernadette particularly interesting with respect to, how would we define work addiction if our identity is publishing papers versus it being conceptualized just as a work activity. Sometimes the addiction model can make us blur those lines. So it's really, really interesting. Within the cost action, we've kind of mapped out, if you like, a utopian and a dystopian pathway for early career doctoral researchers. And small things like, if we take one of them, the role of work demands or stigma, there's heavy stereotyping with let's say, help seeking. You don't promote help seeking among anyone else in your lab, for example. And this simply increases risk factors for clinical levels of mental health issues further down the road. And then life after the doctorate, that kind of culture is ingrained. And we have seen a loss. Again, this varies across cultures, but we've seen a lot of high profile incidents of very worrying mental health trends, particularly with respect to suicide. And this applies to undergrad right through to postgrad as well. Supervision, bullying, harassment, there's been high profile coverage, and these are just some of the cases, for example, in Max Planck, where systematic bullying was called out by the community, with the empowerment of actually the postgraduate community in having a voice and saying, this is not okay. Another area that I'm particularly interested in, and it seems to resonate with a lot of early career researchers through to more senior, and this is this thing of feeling like you're going to be found out any minute, that you're a fraud, that you just work too hard, you're addicted to your work, you got lucky, you're going to be found out. Any day now, someone's going to find out that I shouldn't be here. This imposter phenomenon, all of which really contributes to a very negative cycle of thinking, which is kind of like, I need to get that next grant, I need to get that next paper, otherwise I'm not good enough. You might get there, and then the cycle starts again. I won't spend too much time on it, but it's these sorts of issues that really tend to impact over time our mental health. And this is why we have narratives such as the Great Resignation, the so-called academic quit list, thinking about the grass on the other side. Should I flee the sinking ship type of mentality, which again is it's an unpleasant narrative to be negotiating all the time. And these are among the issues that we've encountered throughout our cost action, and from various workshops that we've done with stakeholders. These are among the issues that are being brought to us. I've only touched on some of them there. When we think about the evidence and certainly policy responses to this, it's another interesting space, because sometimes these things can be tricky to manage at a cause and effect level. But I'm sure many of you are familiar with what was one of the most seminal papers in this field, that of Levesque et al., which was a representative sample from Belgium, finding that 32% of the PhD population were at risk of having or developing common mental health difficulty compared to the general population. And there were significant associations with key organizational policies, including, for example, team decision-making culture, and likewise supervisory leadership style, which is and this really kind of set forth the duty of care response, the kind of because it was a representative population, everyone in this context knew the organizations in question. So it was a very harrowing set of statistics to have. More recent longitudinal data came out of Australia recently. I think this is over a 4-year period, and again finding highly worrying figures in terms of a very low level of psychosocial safety, which is how we would define people feeling supported by senior management, and high levels of psychological distress. And this is amongst Australian university staff, and there's some very interesting interactive data as well, which you might want to check out. And all of this points to a trend that we're aware of, like the internal and external factors that, you know, predict whether, for example, a doctoral researcher will complete their work. When you see them on paper, they're kind of obvious, aren't they? You have to have a clear academic identity, motivation, coupled with the competencies. But you also need good supervision that's aware of this context, as well as kind of overarching institutional support. Because when you don't have that, this is again some data from Max Planck, conflict with supervision always has a strong patterned relationship with, for example, anxiety and depression. Overall, we might be able to synthesize it best with this meta-analysis, which is saying that the prevalence of clinically significant symptoms of depression is just under 25%, consistent with other high stress trainee populations, and just under that 17% for anxiety. So these are worrying figures, but it's also really important to note what is working. And we can often forget about this as well, but the joys and the process of being able to learn, being able to teach, these are among some of my ones, and I'm sure you have your equivalent as well. The cliche is probably true. It is the journey, not the destination. All of this for us from a cost action side kind of came to the fore 2018, where mental health was first put on the agenda in response to some of those key pieces of evidence. And what we've seen from that are a variety of things. That original paper by Katia Levesque and colleagues, they did recommend to target prevention and awareness raising campaigns. So the whole rationale for this webinar is, of course, awareness raising and discussion. So what we are doing now, this question: do we tell incoming PhD colleagues, do we tell them about these contextual factors? The EU Commission very recently has acknowledged a silent epidemic of mental health problems. And again, the prioritization of mental health at policy level is being advanced. And that's what we're trying to do through our 3 working groups. We're looking at policy briefs to kind of synthesize what's happening in each country or not happening in response to these issues. We're hoping to build a representative EU sample of institutional predictors of mental health. And in my own working group, we're looking at kind of bottom-up things. What are we doing to support each other amidst this complex ecosystem? And these are kind of some of the organizations involved. I won't attempt to go through much of what specific stuff we can do, but across these different levels, these are the sorts of things that our network have identified as really important. So if we look at the individual kind of researcher level, and again, this chimes with a lot of the advice from Bernadette as well, having awareness of these issues in the first instance, and doing some of those kind of top tips, obvious as they may seem, really are quite important. But there's some other things that we found especially useful and valuable amidst often resource challenges, stuff like peer-to-peer mentoring, which I'll speak about now in a sec. And the kind of take-home message that I'm always living with is the power of these communities, which is why our cost action has been so great, because when we look at this evidence, it's very, very hard to try and change something overnight. So I won't focus too much on this macro level stuff of, you know, how we gather and build all this causal evidence to eventually get policy change, to have a trickle down effect, to make your lab or my lab immediately better tomorrow. This takes time, and that can be disempowering. But of the top tips that we do know and best practices, they do center around these sorts of points. You know, ideally, it would be great to have individual psychological support, having non-academic and academic kind of career coaching, supervisory training to kind of figure out why these things happen in the first place, mentoring groups, and having evidence-based interventions for these clear issues. That would ideally be what we're striving towards. And again, these are the sorts of things that we typically recommend, and you'll see how it aligns with some of Bernadette's advice as well. Typically, you will get things like this from, I don't know, from HR or from you'll have a lunchtime email saying it's important that you look after your work-life balance, and you hear things like this. And often that can be very challenging when you are trying to, for example, secure funding so you can stay in your institution, for example. These are really challenging pieces of advice to actually operationalize. And the hardest ones tend to be the saying no, and the challenging or the negotiation with someone with more power, typically a supervisor or an institution. And those are the ones that we need to develop peer-to-peer support for. If you go back to the example of the imposter phenomenon and this feeling that we don't belong or that we're going to be found out, it's a very complex thing. But of the factors that moderate that experience, much like work addiction, actually, the institution has a huge role. That structure, the support, the mentoring, and the leadership, all of which moderate whether someone experiencing those feelings actually goes on to experience things like burnout or more severe mental health issues. And all this, for me, from a psychology background, distills into these types of tips. What are the things that you can do within your own organization at a peer-to-peer level, however informal? What are the things that you can institute to start this conversation? And it could be as simple as, I mean, this is going back to Bernadette's tip about don't work at lunchtime. You know, actually asking how a colleague is doing over that lunch and not speaking about work and instituting that. It sounds very simple, but something like that brings about cultural change, which when you go to a different lab or a different workplace, you may be surprised to see different types of cultures with respect to these things. I'm always very critical of any self-help or pseudo-psychologist or whomever that says they can fix it, and always be cautious of any sort of fix-it approach. My kind of bias lies with the more evidence-based cognitive behavioral therapeutic approaches. So simply understanding and connecting how our thoughts and feelings impact what we're doing behaviorally is a really, really important area. And I'll just give you a couple of links for things that we have discussed within our cost action. And you can find all of these on our YouTube channel. You know, often we have that question, what can I do today amidst this really complex kind of ecosystem of challenges? And for example, we've had people talk about a healthy lab culture. We've seen the reforming research assessment in Europe that's trying to abolish some of these toxic quantitative you know, international markers of what success means in favor of a more true reflection of how we actually do research and impact, and trying to eliminate some of those stressors. Mental health first aid is another one. What can people do to support someone who might be actually quite distressed, but they're not a clinician themselves, for example? And mentoring and peer-to-peer, and there's different sorts of words for that. All of these things can have a really useful role in you being able to do something for yourself and likewise others.
You might need to leave it there, Dara. Is that
Sure.
okay? Are you
That's
finishing?
absolutely fine.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you very, very much. That was a fantastic presentation, overlapped so very nicely with Bernadette. So thank you very much, Dara. I really appreciate that. We have 11 minutes for some questions for Dara. And if anyone else wants, first of all, some questions for Dara, I think. I was I'm going to jump in myself then, because one thing that I thought was quite interesting about your presentation, Dara, was this idea of, yeah, maybe a lot of people when they enter academia feeling like that's the only track for them or that's the only career for them. And I've not been supervising PhDs for so very long, but those that I have been supervising, I've always been kind of trying to get them to think in terms of plan B, C, D, E, outside of academia, since it can be such a toxic culture. In your experience, are there a lot of universities coming up with some kind of transferable skills courses? I know the University of Bergen, where I am in Norway, they have one. They have one course on transferable skills, and it's how to do a literature review, which seems like a very academic and non-transferable skill to me. What's your experience?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's I think that's an evolving space, really, really variable as well. But it's hugely important because that I think we've moved away from that more biasing phrase of soft skills into something more like in DC we call them we have a whole new futures program that is thinking about more kind of 21st century transversal skills. And a lot of PhDs and even master's students, there are industry equivalent research jobs, NGO equivalent research jobs that often early career people are not aware of, specifically how those skills transfer over. So by being able to empower people to kind of convert their skills or their language for different ecosystems, all of a sudden the horizon seems a bit broader and can function as a plan B and C, which then takes that obsession over plan A. It dissipates it a little bit. So it is really, really important.
Thanks. Other questions, comments? Emily?
Yeah, so you spoke, especially Bernadette, on the personal level, and the second speaker a bit more on the institute level. So yeah, in the Netherlands at least we have a recognition and rewards now, which tries to fix things on the institute level, which has many challenges still. But I was wondering, people are still afraid, I think, that if you fix it if you make it more relaxed, that the quality will go down, or at least the quantity, and that then we will kind of fall behind. But I would think the quality could only go up rather than down. So yeah, maybe you can comment a bit about institute level, what could be done there, and what possible consequences could be, basically. Both of you, so that makes it complicated, but...
So, what I can say about work addiction, that there are evidence that so there are results which show that the higher level of work addiction correlates with lower quality of work. I mean, because of these issues like overwork, chronic fatigue, these people have sleep issues, for instance, because they don't have enough time to rest, then it will increase the problems in concentration, in attention, and even with communication with others. So this increase the risk of irritability in the workplace. And I think in the long term, it can increase the problem. So I think for the companies, it is an important message that in the short term, work addiction can be a good thing, like because we see that, okay, he works a lot or she works a lot, and maybe this person got a lot of publications, but after a while, burnout and other health issues will come. So they have to focus on in the long term, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Dara, do you want to come in?
Yeah, and even to add to that, I mean, we know there's so much research waste as well. And the likes of the Reform and Research Assessment, the COARA, for the universities that have signed it, it's quite radical. It says, let's abolish the whole role of citations. Let's abolish all these crude, quantitative KPI, commercialization type language in favor of good, sustainable, high quality research, which isn't the sorts of things that lead to risk factors for work addiction, for example. So there is a tension there. And there's an interesting movement, whether it's with open science, the reduction of research waste, and the reform of these factors, in knowing that they do relate to our mental health.
What is the research waste? Because I actually don't know.
So research waste, like this obsession with having to publish, really, if we're being critically evaluative of the quality of the research coming out of the university sector, we could say maybe we don't need 5 papers every 2 years. Maybe we need one really, really impactful piece of research, for example. So it's a good question.
I open the floor. There's still 5 minutes for others. I have about 100 questions, so I'm maybe I'll jump in again then. One of the things I found really interesting about your presentation, Bernadette, was that actually it was less this intrinsic motivation because you work because you love your work. I mean, this is what I think a lot of people would associate with scientists, right? Like, oh, I'm so fascinated with how this plant works that I just want to study this plant all day and all night. And so I work myself to death, right? But actually it has a lot more to do with this, what we were calling this introjected or this extrinsic motivation of, oh gosh, I think I have to please this person. My boss needs this report, even though it's a boring report. I don't want to write it. It's not interesting, but I need to fulfill all these functions. This was quite surprising to me.
Yeah, yes. I mean, a lot of people think that workaholics love their work, and I don't want to say that there are no workaholics who love their work. So it's not just like yes or no options, but the research showed that this is most typical, that they work for external positive reinforcements or yes, to avoid these negative feelings. Yes, that what we found and other colleagues found.
And I really appreciate, or I found interesting, of course, that one thing I've found, and it came through in both your talks to a degree, but I that the university typically doesn't need to impose rules or explicit guidelines on you must, some do, of course, but you must publish X number of papers per year and so on. It's enough to just have these kind of strange, I work in one of the research institutes I work in, every time someone publishes something, this email comes around and these little balloons go off as you open the email. Or every time someone gets a new grant, and if you haven't published in a while, or you haven't got a grant that year or the last 2 years, this can feel very oppressive. It makes me think a lot of this kind of Foucauldian governmentality that they just have to make it so that others look like they're doing well, and we feel this guilt and this, I guess, this introjected feeling.
Yeah.
Catalin.
Yeah, thanks for both speakers. And I would have just one question. So I was wondering, are you aware of any initiative or any kind of training, treatment, something against workaholism. So how can you, of course, you can try to manage it on your own using the advice that Bernadette provided, or you can go to consultations. But are there any other methods? This could be early recognized, because I think early recognition or diagnosis is important. And then are there any kind of, I don't know, trainings, courses? I don't know.
There are very limited data on this field. I mean, these intervention studies, but there is one, as I know, which tested a meditation-based therapy for workaholics, and it was like a 7 or 8 weeks long intervention. And they used not mindfulness, but something like that. So it was meditation-based therapy, 1 session a week, and one consultation, and it showed a very, very good result. So there was a significant increase in their mental health and decrease in work addiction symptoms. So I think this kind of intervention, like mindfulness-based therapies, can be useful because it helps the people to focus on the present and not just to stress on the future things, like publish another paper and everything what we have in this academic field. So I think it can be a good option. And I don't know the other countries, but in Hungary there is a workaholic anonymous group. And of course, if we talk these issues with a coach or a psychologist, I think it can help. So yes, maybe this is very simple answer. I mean the last one, but it is very important.
Thanks.
Dara, do you have anything on that last note, or any last things you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, just a brief one for anyone that would like to be a part of the evidence base building. I've shared a link in the chat if you'd like to have your voice heard as well, or if you'd like to join the cost action to join any of these battles, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Then it just remains for me to thank both of our speakers, Dara and Bernadette, for your fantastic talks today. It's really nice to see. Sometimes I think we can feel very alone in the way we feel about our work life, or we have some anecdotal evidence we feel, by talking to the odd colleague or two. So it's, for me at least, it's been really nice to see that, there are some larger scale surveys and work being done so that we can feel like, yeah, this really is a systemic problem. And, we are all in this together. So no, thank you very much indeed. I will finish now, but I'll leave the Zoom open for a couple of minutes if people want to click on Dara's link in the chat. Otherwise, I thank you very much, everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dara. It was really nice.
Pleasure. I hope it went well. That's good.